The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, A Finer Future, a conversation with Hunter Lovins about higher education climate action. My name is Michelle Medea, Director of Programs with Second Nature, and we're delighted to have you with us this afternoon. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. The webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be sent to all participants in the days ahead. We have this webinar is intended to be a dialogue and a conversation, and we will allow some time for Q&A at the end. So please do submit questions at any time using the questions function on your GoToWebinar panel. So we're going to be joined by two presenters today, both of whom are well known to our audience, but I will give them some short introductions. Dr. Eben Goodstein is Director of the Center for Environmental Policy and the MBA program in Sustainability at Bard College. In recent years, Goodstein has coordinated a series of national educational initiatives on climate change involving over 2,500 colleges, universities, high schools, and community organizations. He's the author of several books and many articles. His research has been featured in leading publications. He serves on the editorial board of Sustainability of the Journal of Record and is also a member of the board of directors of the Follett Corporation. In addition to all of that, just a personal side, he is a valued member of our Climate Leadership Network, and we really appreciate his efforts on behalf of signatory institutions and our sector broadly. So thank you to Eben. And we are also honored to be joined today by Dr. Hunter Lovins, who almost needs no introduction, but again, I will say a few words. She's president and founder of National Capitalism Solutions, a nonprofit formed in 2002 in Longmont, Colorado, which is a beautiful town. I was there this summer. A renowned author and champion of sustainable development for over 35 years, she's consulted on business, economic development, sustainable agriculture, energy, water, security, and climate policies for scores of governments, communities, and companies worldwide. Within the United States, she has consulted for heads of state, departments of defense, energy agencies, and hundreds of state and local agencies. She believes that citizens, communities, and companies working together within the market context are the most dynamic problem-solving force on the planet. She's devoted herself to building teams that can create and implement practical and affordable solutions to the problems facing us in creating a sustainable future. She's co-authored 15 books and hundreds of articles and was featured in the award-winning film Lovins on the Soft Path. Her best-known book, Natural Capitalism, won the Shingo Prize. It has been translated into more than 36 languages and summarized in the Harvard Business Review. Its sequel, The Way Out, Kickstarting Capitalism to Save Our Economic Ass, won the Atlas Award, and Creating a Lean and Green Business System again won the Shingo Prize. We're thrilled to have her here today to discuss her newest book, A Finer Future, Creating an Economy in Service to Life. Eben, I'll turn it over to you to begin the conversation, and just a reminder to all participants to please submit your questions at any time. Thanks.
Michelle, thank you very much for hosting, and Second Nature for all the great work that you guys do. I want to set this conversation up a little by giving some people some context for Hunter's work, and also talking a little bit about the work that she's done with us at Bard. Auspicious or inauspicious time, you know, we've just had the IPCC report come out. A lot of people I'm talking with are sobered up yet again, as if we needed more sobering. We just had the 7th record-breaking hurricane to hit the United States in 2 years. So every hurricane that has hit the United States in the last 2 years has been record-breaking on some dimension. That, of course, is not supposed to be what records are about. So, you know, we're gathered here at a time of a real challenge, but also real opportunity, of course. The work that Hunter Lovins has done over the last 40 years has really been paradigm shifting, and I don't use that word lightly. So the way that we thought about environmental and social challenges in the 20th century were really heavily influenced by neoclassical economics, and so we really thought about kind of environmental problems as externalities. And social exploitation as an externality, right? It was just a social cost of business that business could not avoid, because if any business tried to, you know, internalize those externalities on its own or address those issues of social exploitation on its own, they would be at a competitive disadvantage and they would be run out of business. And so the consequence was the real solution, and the only solution, was government regulation, right? So the government needed to step in and level the playing field to eliminate or reduce those kinds of external social and environmental costs. And what Hunter's work, and really I can't overemphasize how much of a leader she's been in this space since the late 70s and early 80s, is to radically sort of flip that on its head and instead think of this as social environmental problems as design problems. That if, sure, there's externalities and we get it out that way, but it's actually more helpful to think about them as design problems, and that we can actually think about solving social and environmental problems through business models profitably if only business would reimagine what it's doing. And that has had the effect of turning business from kind of an enemy of progress and something that had to be restrained by government to really viewing it as an engine of transformation, which, if done effectively, has the ability to do what it does well, which is rapidly spread profitable innovations around the world to, kind of dramatically accelerate the kind of move towards a sustainable future that we could imagine. Now, of course, it's not easy to move a business from an old-fashioned paradigm into a new-fashioned paradigm. And Hunter's book in 1999, Natural Capitalism, was really one of the seminal texts that has, unleashed the explosion of sustainable business. So every big, Fortune 500 company, every large university, hospitals got sustainability directors, teams of professionals whose job it is to really implement the vision that Hunter and others developed in the 80s and 90s. And so really seminal work. Now, 20 years later, Hunter's written A Finer Future, and we're going to get into what that really means. In many ways, it's a more challenging time to think about a finer future, and I'm glad that she's written a book with that title, and I think we all need to embrace that possibility. But what we want to talk about today is really that evolution from this vision of business as potentially a profitable agent for change to, okay, the process is underway, how do we accelerate it? How do we drive the kind of change in a hurry that we need to do because we don't have a lot of time? Hunter has been also instrumental. She was in this world of sustainable business education, and she has taught at a number of institutions that have been trying to transform this space. In 2012, she joined with me to found the Bard MBA in Sustainability, and teaches in our New York City program. So she may talk a bit more about that and her experience in sort of building the leadership capacity that we need to drive the change. And next slide. Yeah, and so what's core about our business program is really that every major business program in the country has now added a person or a class or a thing in sustainability, but because they are inhabited by faculty who were trained in the 20th century in kind of a Milton Friedman perspective, what they tend to teach is old-fashioned single bottom line, make as much money as you can without breaking too many laws kind of business that's got us into this problem in the first place. And so what we've done at Bard is build now one of the top graduate programs in the country that fully integrates a focus on mission-driven business into a core business curriculum. So we teach marketing, strategy, economics, operations, but every class is built around this idea that Hunter pioneered, which is, how do you build businesses that are actually in business to solve social and environmental problems? Got to make money, of course, because you got to pay the workers and get resources to scale. But at the end of the day, how do you put mission first and have profitability follow? And again, I can't emphasize enough how dramatic the sort of mind shift among large corporations has been as a consequence of the work that Hunter and others have done. This idea of mission-driven business has been embraced by virtually every Fortune 500 company. Now, whether that's kind of purpose washing or real, who knows? And I'll quote Hunter here. She likes to say that hypocrisy is the first step towards real change, and it gives us the opening to drive the kind of change that we're talking about. So next slide. And again, so this is just IPCC. And Hunter, now I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks.
Eben, thank you. I suspect many of you are feeling in despair, in gloom. Oh my God, we have 12 years to turn this around. How can we possibly do this? I'm actually feeling incredibly optimistic. We've known this. When Eben and I were in Copenhagen at, gosh, what was it, COP15, and the conference of parties failed to seal the deal to come up with an international agreement on climate change, we put out in the street a set of candles that spelled out 350. We knew then that 2 degrees C warming is unsustainable, is perhaps unsurvivable. We knew then that the violence of storms, the floods, droughts, fires, hurricanes, all of this were the signatures of climate change already, and we've only seen it worse since then. So to me, the fact that the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has finally had the guts to say what we have all known, what they knew back then, and were muzzled by national governments from saying, this is a monumental and great achievement, and we all ought to be celebrating the fact that now we have our marching orders. Because, come on, climate change is going to destroy life as we know it on the planet. It will not destroy all of life. George Carlin, the comedian, said, save the earth will be fine. It'll shake us off like a bad case of fleas. What we're talking about is saving life as we know it. And now we're losing life at a greater rate than when the dinosaurs went extinct. We're losing coral reefs. Sorry, scuba divers. Business as usual, perhaps as early as 2030, there will be no living coral reefs on planet Earth unless we begin to roll climate change backwards. The Amazon is drying up and burning. This is the Earth's lungs. And the oceans are acidifying. This is a bit more serious. Every other breath you take was given to you by the phytoplankton in the ocean. Their numbers are decreasing. We're not quite sure why, but the acidification of the oceans, the warming of the oceans is clearly part of this. So what the hell are we going to do? The scientists tell us that perhaps by 2040, the Middle East will be too hot to be inhabitable. There are already 67 million human beings on the move. The slide was a year ago when it was only 65. Think about it yourself. What would you do? Your farm is failing. Your national government is in disarray because of the stresses added by climate change, the droughts, the 40 years of drought in the Middle East, North Africa. You cannot stay. What would you do? And this is only going to get worse until we begin to solve these problems. So is there a solution? Yes, back in, 1995, 3 of us got together and started writing this book, Natural Capitalism, which Eben referred to. You know, you write books, Find Your Future is now my 16th. Many of them disappear without trace. Nobody's ever heard of them. Every now and again, one makes a difference. And this one seemed to make a difference. It caught particularly businesses at a time at which they were beginning to realize maybe we're part of the problem. And what we said was, if you behave as if you're the solution, you'll make more money. And so many of them have started to do that. And we are well on our way to a corporate sector that knows that it has to take responsibility, but increasingly is asking, is CSR enough? Is it enough just to have recycle? Is it enough to have a chief sustainability officer? And of course, the answer is no. So a couple of years ago, I got in an argument with some folks at the Club of Rome who basically said, it's over, we're all going to die. And I said, that is the most profoundly irresponsible position I've ever heard anybody take. You are the result of 3.8 billion years of evolution. Act like it. When rabbits are threatened, they freeze. When humans are threatened, we entrepreneur. So I joined with Stuart Wallace, who for many years ran New Economics Foundation, Anders Wiegman, who led the Club of Rome, and then walked away to create Capital Institute. And we wrote this book, A Finer Future, to say, yeah, we're in trouble. We're in a mess. How do we get into this mess? Even mentioned the ideology of neoliberalism. If you've had an economics class, this stuff's in your head. This point of view says humans are greedy bastards, but that's okay because markets are perfect, and in a perfect market, you versus me will somehow aggregate to the greater good for all. No, it won't. Sorry. Interesting theory. It's not true. And this theory, it was not graven in stone and given to Moses. It was invented by 36 men, yeah, they were all men, who got together at a hotel outside Montreux, Switzerland, a place called Mont Pelerin, and they argued for 10 days, and they put forth a story, the story of neoliberalism. We don't need governments because markets are perfect. And people are really bad actors, but you know, in a free market, that'll all work out to the good. They got their members as advisors to every head of state on the planet. Milton Friedman took over the Chicago School of Economics, which is why if you've had an economics class, this stuff's in your head. They got 3 of their members as heads of state. In 1971, a man named Lewis Powell wrote a memorandum at the behest of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce wanted to see how it is that business could be the dominant force. And Powell said business must seize power, use it assiduously, and fund the effort to put this ideology up as the dominant ideology. And so they did. They created the Heritage Foundation. They created the Judicial Crisis Network. Fast forward to 2 years ago, our Cheeto-in-Chief walks into the Oval Office, deer in the headlights, because he didn't expect to win. He gets handed a playbook written by the Heritage Foundation. Who put Kavanaugh up to be a judge? The Judicial Crisis Network. These guys are organized. They have a narrative. They have a strategy. What do we have? Yeah, right. So this group of us, Stuart Wallace now leads a group called We All, Wellbeing Economy Alliance. Anders, as I mentioned, has the Club of Rome. With John Fullerton yesterday here in Boulder, Denver, we launched a regenerative economics hub. They're launching these things all over the world. They're tied in with We All. And what we're trying to do is pull together the people who want to create an alternative narrative. A Finer Future is our crack at what is this narrative. That basically people are not greedy bastards. When humans came down out of the trees in Africa, we were naked. Our claws aren't very impressive. Our teeth aren't worth much. We're not as fast as a lion. You are here today because our ancestors cared more for the good of the whole than any one of them did for him or herself. And we know this from the DNA evidence, from the archaeological evidence. There were lots of tribes of pre-humans. Most of them went extinct. The ones that survived, and thus your ancestors, were those who cared for those who were disabled, for the elderly. They cared for the group. So when you feel good, when you do something kind for somebody else, that's not a bug in you. That's who it means to be human. We need this new narrative of a world that works for everyone, and which is why the subtitle is Creating an Economy in Service to Life. The good news, we have the technology, we know what to do. And so in the book, we walk through what is this new narrative of a regenerative future. This is John Fullerton's work. How do we begin to reform governance? This is Anders's work. What is the policy that we need at the global level, the national level, the state and regional level? And what is it that you as an individual can do? We show that the renewable technologies are winning in the marketplace. However imperfect that market may be, Guess what? Solar, wind, renewables are now cheaper than any form of fossil fuel essentially everywhere on the planet. That can't possibly be, you say. Yeah, well, check it out. Here in Colorado, put out an all sources bid. Come on, slide. There you go. There you go, twice, 3 times. They said, who can supply us 1,100 megawatts at any price from any source? Wind came in slightly below 2 cents a kilowatt hour. Solar came in slightly above 2 cents a kilowatt hour. Solar plus wind plus storage, 3 cents a kilowatt hour, or in this particular slide, $30 a megawatt hour. There was the cheapest fossil bid for natural gas was $40 a megawatt hour, 4 cents a kilowatt hour. A cent above the renewables. On the strength of this, Excel, which has always been fond of coal and natural gas, actually applied to the Public Utility Commission for permission to shut 2 of their existing coal plants years before they were supposed to be retired and go to 60% renewables. Now, why not 100%? Well, give them a year or 2 to get used to the idea that solar and wind storage really are cheaper. I work with a man named Tony Seba who says inevitably, for fundamental economic reasons, the world will be 100% renewably powered by 2030. The reasons are fall in the cost of solar, fall in the cost of storage, batteries, then the electric car and the driverless car. China has already announced they're phasing out the internal combustion engine. General Motors has said our future is electric and autonomous. There are 40 companies, it's a who's who of the industrial world, working on autonomous vehicles. They're on the road already today. Yeah, one of them killed somebody, but consider that drivered cars kill 6,000 pedestrians a year. Cars are dangerous. The electric autonomous cars will deliver the service you want, the ability to get from here to there, 10 times cheaper than paying to buy fuel, maintain, insure a private vehicle. Folks, we're not talking about polar bears. This is fundamental economic logic. It is cheaper to solve the climate crisis. We will do so at a profit. Actually, to be correct, we'll solve half the climate crisis. Whoa, let's go the other way. Come on. When the Kentucky Coal Museum puts solar on its roof because it's cheaper than hooking into the coal-fired electric grid at its doorstep, you know it's over. We are exiting the fossil era and entering the triumph of the sun. I said it solves half the climate crisis because we are already at 410 parts per million concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. Humans have never been in this state before. Our species evolved with concentration more like 280 parts per million. The Holocene, the era of relative stability in which all of agriculture was created, was 280 parts per million. We have no experience in living in this world of high concentrations of CO2. So the other half of the solution to the climate crisis is agriculture, but done very differently than we do today. It's called holistic management or regenerative agriculture. It involves deep-rooted perennial plants and animal impact. That animal impact turns out to be incredibly important in driving carbon deep into the ground. When the first pioneers came across the Great Plains of the US, they found 10 feet of thick black soil. That black is carbon. How did it get there? It got there with the coevolution of dense herds of grazing animals and grasslands. The world's grasslands are the world's second largest carbon sink after the oceans. And like the oceans, we have been decarbonizing them by plowing the ground, inverting it, and by managing it in ways very different from how it co-evolved. Regenerative management is, and this is a picture of me working 1,000 acres of ground where we practiced this, which is one of the reasons I know that it works. We took ground that was desertifying, eroding, being invaded by noxious weeds, and using electric fences, opening and closing water holes, and dense packing the animals, so that just like the bison on the Great Plains, they eat everything, their hooves chop up the soil, they fertilize the ground, and then you drop the electric fence, they go across into the fresh grass, and they don't come back to the place they had been until the grass has grown again. This action is what drives carbon deep into the roots. These are numbers from a man named Gabe Brown, who was growing corn, soybeans on ground up in North Dakota, going broke, trying to do commodity farming. He said, because I'm going broke, I'm going to do something different. He first went to no-till. He stopped breaking the soil. Then he started planting cover crops, deep-rooted perennials. Then he brought on animals. The animals eat the cover crops, so now he's no longer having to grow animal feed for them. In the last decade, he has used no fertilizer, no pesticides, no herbicides, and very little mechanical energy. On some of his plots, he has gone from a little over 1% soil organic matter to over 11%. Native prairie is 7% soil organic matter. We can roll climate change backward, and this is what Gabe is doing. He has shown that this progression of moving away from conventional agriculture to holistically managed grazing is the way in which you take carbon out of the air and put it back where it belongs as a nutrient in the soil. We've caused climate change by digging up and burning fossil carbon, what's been called ancient sunlight. The solution, put the carbon back in the soil. And when you do that, you enhance the profitability for the farmers and ranchers. Because this stuff is profitable, it can go to scale, it can do it very quickly. Patagonia has teamed with the Land Institute in Salina, Kansas. You can see the annual wheat with tiny little roots, and then the perennial wheat, what's called kernza, stuff on the left with deep roots. That's how the carbon gets deep in the soil. So Patagonia is making beer out of this kernza wheat called long root ale. What can you do? Shop, buy your food from farmers who are practicing holistic management. How do you know? Ask them. Ask your grocer. Grocer's going to say, I don't know. Ask them to find out. Shop at farmers markets. Work with your local farmers, ranchers, so that you're ensuring that you're supporting this transition to regenerative agriculture. We have achieved in the Paris Protocol a universal agreement, well, universal until our child in chief got in office, to reduce greenhouse gases. And it's not enough. We knew it at the time when I was in Paris, when Eben was in Paris, we knew it was not enough. The question for us now is, what kind of a future do we want to create? And we have almost no vision of living in a world that works. Bucky Fuller called for a world that works for 100% of humanity. What would that feel like? What would that look like? We have lots of apocalyptic movies about zombies and the end of the world, and even the end of life on Earth, Wall-E, this poor little robot going around Earth, world of the future. We set out some vignettes of what it might be like. And again, we have all the technologies. It's a question of implementing them and telling these stories, making known what's possible. We need to do this first and foremost on our universities, where we teach young people. So the work of Dr. David Orr at Oberlin, building the Adam Lewis Center. This was LEED Platinum before LEED existed as a system. It's also now been designated as a living building. But there are many other colleges that are doing these sorts of things. The highest ranked ASU score is American Association for the the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education, is just up the road from where I live at Colorado State. They got platinum in the stars rating. They are doing air conditioning with solar. Yes, it's possible, and they're doing it. They have a great program called the Powerhouse. They took over an old utility powerhouse and converted it to a research and implementation center for renewable energy, energy efficiency. But they're only one of the universities doing this. At ASU, bless it, at ASU, you can get a PhD in sustainability. ASU pioneered the American College and University President's Climate Commitment, ACU PCC. Has your school signed on to this? And if it has it put in place a plan to achieve carbon neutrality? And if it has that plan, how's it going? Are you implementing it? At ASU, they're going to eliminate greenhouse gases from buildings by 2025, from the campus by 2035. Now remember, if Tony Seba's right, we'll be 100% renewable by 2030. There are lots and lots of other programs. These are campuses that have required all new buildings to be at least LEED certified. And some of them are the schools that claim to be the leading universities in our nation. Many, many more. There's simple things you can do. Ohio State realized that in many of their classrooms, they leave the computer monitors on 24/7. They said, turn them off if you're not sitting in front of them. Just doing that saved the university $2,500 a year. They were then able to apply that money for the academic programs. At Bard, on the main campus, we grow a lot of the vegetables that we eat. They put a plan in place to be 20% by 2020. They got to 24% by 2015. And guess what? The food tastes better. Financing. How do you begin to move money from harm to healing? There are a lot of university programs that tie together energy efficiency programs with the funding of ever more aggressive renewables programs. And that's just smart business. Take the savings that you can achieve and don't just put it back into the general budget. Put it into a fund to enable you to do more every year. Get the students involved. At CU Boulder, the university wanted to raise rates. The students put out a referendum of, okay, we'll abide by higher rates if you allow us to spend some of that money on energy efficiency, on sustainability programs. And so the school created a student-run environmental center and wrote the blueprint for a green campus. They're looking at not just the buildings, but how people move around, where the food comes from, how they create a circular economy. Butte College said, okay, if this stuff's so cheap, let's use it. They're more than 100% renewable now. They're making money by selling the excess power. They get 50 to 75 million a year by selling this power, and they're investing it back into the academic programs. Hampshire College put up a 19-acre solar farm, making $8 million a year. Oh, and they voted to divest the college endowment from fossil fuels. $6.3 trillion under management belongs to investors who have pledged to divest. This has been a hot button issue on a lot of college campuses. So a group of us got together 2 years ago and created a fund that allows you to do this, but still get a good return. The company is called Change Finance, and we built a little ETF that is not only high environment, social, good governance as a floor. These are the kinds of companies that you want to be invested in because, for example, in the hospitality industry, they are taking an active stand against sex trafficking. In the transportation industry, they are pledging to increase the amount of renewable energy that they use. And they're truly fossil fuel free. So if you're in a divestment fight, check it out. You can put your money into this. It's 100 large cap American companies. You'll feel better at night. What we did was take the Russell 1000. We built a set of metrics that are the kinds of investment screens of companies that we want to involve in, and then built this little fund. So again, check it out. Pete Seeger said the key to the future of the world is finding the optimistic stories and letting them be known. You can react to the IPCC report by thinking, oh my God, it's over, I don't have a future. Or you can go out and build a finer future. Trust me, it's there in the book, A Finer Future, Creating an Economy in Service to Life. We walk through how you do this, how you transform companies, how you transform the finance sector, transform energy, transform agriculture, transform your own community. This work is going on globally. It's going on locally. Check it out. Join us, and I'd be happy now to answer any questions if anything I've said seems at all controversial to you. Let's have a conversation. Thanks so much for being on this webinar.
Eben, we'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, Hunter, thank you so much. That was a great summary of your work and the book. You know, I think what natural capitalism and that vision has done is it's just created so many positive stories. We have a podcast called The Impact Report, where we hear kind of bi-weekly our students interview top sustainability leaders from business and government, reach out to their heroes and heroines in this space, and have great conversations with them. Just last week, we were hearing about Danone Yogurt North America, which is I guess the biggest publicly traded B Corp in existence.
Yes.
And just amazing to sort of think about the level of transformation that sort of a B Corp requires of a company. And so, you know, I think we just can't emphasize enough how much of a sort of mindset transformation this natural capitalism idea has unleashed in 20 years, and yet time is short. You know, we've got this sort of Tony Siva story on the energy side about how kind of we're inevitably going to be, you know, in 12 years we're going to be, you know, 100% solar.
Well, Eben, how about the guy in Tivoli that you asked about? When could you whistle up one of these AEVs?
Yeah, no, I mean, but not just Tivoli. I talked to the head of JD Power, and he was asking me, when am I going to have a vehicle that's going to come, you know, pick me up at my home, autonomous EV, take me to school at BART, and be cheaper than my pickup truck, which I've already paid for. So it's just the gas cost. And they said 2023, he and two other people. So, I mean, that is a very positive story. And yet, you know, I think most of us look around the world and we just don't see in our communities solar accelerating at that rate. What is the biggest barrier kind of in the economy towards companies really embracing this kind of radical change?
I believe the biggest barrier is this myth of neoliberalism, which goes along with the myth of shareholder primacy. That was part of neoliberalism. That what matters is, as Milton Friedman said, corporate social responsibility. I'll give you corporate social responsibility. It is to deliver value to owners. Full stop. That myth has put into the minds of corporate managers that their only obligation is to their shareholders. And that's actually not true. There have been any number of court cases. The great professor Lynn Stout, who tragically just died of cancer, has a great book out on the myth of shareholder primacy. But we need to, and this is why you and I created a business school. We need to get people into business who think differently. And we need to reach out to the business leaders. So one of the classes that our students at Bard take, they enter, when they first enter the school, they enter this class called New York City Lab, NYC Lab. And in it, they work with Laura Gitman of Businesses for Social Responsibility to learn how to be a corporate consultant. And companies, agencies, NGOs vie to get our student teams to help them implement what they're learning from me in the Principles of Sustainable Management class, what they're learning in their Leadership and Personal Development class, and help these companies, these agencies, begin on this road to transformation. When we created WeAll, a company approached us, knew one of the staff members, a marvelous woman named Catherine Trebek, who was with Oxfam until she left and came with WeAll, and said, how do we transform? You know, we've done a lot of the good housekeeping of energy efficiency, but how do we transform as a company to become a company of the 21st century? And so we have a team that's working with this company, a household brand name company that is heavily dependent on plastics. And we're going to help them think through, what is the future of plastic? And are there alternatives to plastic? Or does plastic have to be petroleum-based and single use? How do you begin to recycle their product? How do they create a circular economy that takes their product at end of life and turns it into new product or turns it into something new and better? Mm-hmm. One of our teams competed in a business competition that was put on by Patagonia. Patagonia said, how do we, even as good as we are, how do we become better? And our team was one of the winners who won a trip to Ventura to work with Patagonia to help Patagonia improve. And their suggestion was, stop selling new clothing. And the Patagonia people said, how come in here and tell us not to do our business? And the students said, that's what you asked us. You asked us, how can you transform? And so Patagonia has made a deep commitment to taking back used clothing, remanufacturing it, repairing it, selling it. We're going to transform everything, because if we don't, the world is going to become a very grim place. The more wake-up calls we get, like Hurricane Michael, like Hurricane Maria, there are still thousands of American citizens without power, without water from a hurricane a year ago. And so FEMA has the regulation, you can only rebuild what was there before. So they're busily trying to rebuild the bankrupt, corrupt, coal-based utility on an island that's washed in sunshine. So even before the winds had stopped blowing, Elon Musk was shipping solar panels and power walls to Puerto Rico. There are a dozen companies now in Puerto Rico building microgrids. And what we're going to see is that these microgrids perform better, are cheaper, and are not vulnerable to total system destruction like the old coal-based utility was. As these examples pop up in communities, more and more people are going to say, I want that. I have solar panels on my ranch. When we flooded in 2013, the power was out for a week, not at my house. Called up my neighbor, said, hey, you want to charge your cell phones, or you have food rotting, you want to bring it over to the fridge? Come on, we had power. This approach is more resilient. It's better for national security. Yeah, go ahead, Eben.
Well, I was going to say, if people want to ask questions of Hunter, Michelle, do they just type it in the chat? Is that what, or is the questions? Which one do they type into here?
I believe they type it into questions.
Questions. Okay, great. Well, so Hunter, you know, as you know, in our MBA, we sort of have 3 levels of things that we teach. One is sustainability vision, right? So how do you see those opportunities, profitable opportunities, where other people see social and environmental costs? The second level is leadership, right? So once you've got that vision, how do you get people engaged with that vision? And then the third part is kind of the business execution. And so what you're telling me, I think, is that it really is the vision piece that is the obstacle. So here at Bard, we're trying to figure out how do we deliver on our, our president's climate commitment to be climate neutral. And probably the thing we're not doing is bringing the whole community together to brainstorm about that. It gets isolated off into, somebody's professional job, and they don't have the ability to sort of really see the big picture.
Wow, you guys need to bring Alastair up to Bard. You might want to describe what Alastair did at Vassar.
Well, he's done a lot of work. So one of our graduate students, Alastair Hall, is head of sustainability at Vassar College. They were, I think, just awarded number 4. They tied with a bunch of schools for their water efforts. And I was just looking, Vassar cut their emissions of CO2 by about 50%. So they're halfway there. I don't think Bard has moved as far along the journey. But even at Vassar, they've stalled out a bit. And so, it's this question of how do we get people to come together to focus on these solutions and really deliver on the vision of the bigger piece.
Well, again, one of the reasons I'm so thrilled with the IPCC report, it's very easy to get distracted. We all have lives to live. We're only 36 hours in a day. Oh, climate change, it's not really that bad, is it? Yeah, it is, and it's nice to be reminded of it. So come on, guys, let's pick it up and finish the job.
So getting away from business for a minute, obviously there's a lot of policy work to be done, outside of, internal organizational policy. Hard to see the U.S. government kind of, because of the sort of electoral college and the Senate, being jury-rigged so that we have a minority government ruling a majority public opinion. We're actually not out of Paris yet, by the way, and we may not leave it.
That's correct. We cannot get out of Paris until the day before Trump leaves office. Yeah. And even if on that day he says, yeah, we're out, the next gal can say, we're in.
Right. But getting in, so my point here is that I'm not looking to the national government for leadership in the next 4 to 6 to 8 years. But it seems like what we are seeing is just this incredible opportunity at the state and local level to drive change. And I think that, especially if we're thinking about solar deployment, a lot of it is about like local regulatory policy.
Well, energy has never really been about Washington. It keeps saying that it is. Washington's never heard about the cracks around your window. Washington has never sat in a community meeting where citizens come together and say, what kind of a community do we want to have? So we did this, for example, in Boulder, where the citizens said, could we please have a municipal utility? Because Xcel Energy at the time was wholly committed to coal. And the citizens drove that forward. In Fort Collins, Colorado, the community said, we want to create a climate economy. We want it to address inequality and create equality of opportunity for all citizens to live a finer future. Communities all across this country are organizing around what can we do about this IPCC report. The state of California, the Republican governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, put in place a cap on carbon emissions because he said it's just good business. and then turned over to the Democratic-run California Air Resources Board to say, how do we implement this? They put in place a market. So here you have a Republican putting in place what they first thought was draconian policy, and a Democrat putting in place a market solution. It lifted California from the world's 8th largest economy to now the world's 5th largest economy. It's working, and it's empowering business. California, like many areas, has vastly more jobs in energy efficiency, renewable energy, than in any of the extractive industries like oil, gas, coal, uranium. So it's better business.
But also, it's better business, but it's more opportunity for policy engagement than I think people realize. Because you may despair about what's happening in Washington, but actually, really what matters probably for driving this clean energy transformation is what's happening in the local and state governments. I mean, it used to be maybe that we needed large-scale subsidies and blah, 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 but that's just not relevant now. Now it's about deployment of and getting rid of the obstacles to deployment of what are already now profitable technologies.
Well, we needed the large-scale subsidies to deal with the fact that fossil energy was getting even larger scale subsidies and
Right.
still is to this day. $5.3 trillion. That's $1 million a minute of your and my tax dollars being spent on the kinds of energy that is polluting, is dangerous, that we don't want. So I'm a free marketeer. Let's get rid of all forms of subsidy. Let them all compete on their merits. And yeah, I believe in the tooth fairy too. But at a local level, you can go to your city council. You can know the names of your city council people. You can take them to coffee. You can talk about these issues. And if you don't know your senator, congressperson, on a first name basis, if they're not going to say hi when they see you on the street, you're not being a citizen. You're being a couch potato. I got to know my congressman. We were doing some work around community economic development, so I went to see him, a man named Jared Polis. He's now running for governor. And I guarantee you, if he saw me on the street, he'd say, hi, Hunter.
Well, you're pretty recognizable with your hat, I got to say.
Yeah, a little easy to recognize me, but Jared's like that with everybody who takes the time to go to meet him.
Mm-hmm.
Here in Colorado, the citizens put forward an initiative to limit fracking, to keep fracking more than 2,500 feet away from a school, from a hospital, from a residence. And the oil and gas industry is throwing millions of dollars against us. We'll see on election day whether or not the citizens can pull this one out. But it has energized people throughout Colorado to get active on these issues of how do we build a community that we want to live in.
I'm not seeing, Michelle, any questions from the audience. Maybe it's my panel. Are you seeing anything?
There was one that I do want to take a moment to ask, just because it's applicable to everybody. Hunter, after we're done with this presentation, I just want to confirm with you and let everybody know that we will share it back with the audience. We've had some folks express interest in replaying it for their students and faculty. So
absolutely,
so we will do that. So everybody rest assured, we'll send
widely. And one of the things I do, by the way, is go around the world. I'm sort of continually in motion. Come to colleges, universities, sit with your students, teach a class or two, and talk about these issues. So if anybody's interested, the website is here on the screen. Feel free to see if I can fit it in my schedule to come spend some time with y'all.
Michelle, what was that question you had? Was that it, or?
That was it. That was the one. That was the one that I wanted to make sure I got in.
All right. Well, Hunter, so let's kind of go back to this vision question. I mean, your book in some ways is that, but what I know you brought a lot of people together to sort of figure out how to tell this story of a finer future more effectively, more engagingly. What are the lessons from those communities that you've been engaged with about? Because I think it's strikingly true. Is someone quoted me recently, said, it's easier for us to imagine the end of the world than it is for us to imagine putting solar panels on our roofs or something, you know?
Sadly true.
Yeah.
And so here's one thing that we've been doing is convening vision sessions, dream sessions, where we ask people, what is it about your economy that you love? What is it about your economy that you would rather do without? And when you ask people, what do you love? Oh, the little coffee shop down on the corner. Oh, the fact that the dog park. I love going and meeting my neighbors at the dog park. They get very granular very quickly. And so you say, I mean, we did this recently here in Colorado. We said, what is the economy? And people said, oh, we're in extractive industries. We have coal. We're an oil and gas state. We cut timber. We mine. You know what? It's not true. It's the myth in many states that we're dependent on these extractive industries. In Colorado, our services sector is well over 50% of the economy. We're a cannabis state. We passed a law, citizens passed a law that you could smoke dope legally. So we're growing, not just THC, but CBD and hemp. We're an outdoor industries state. The Outdoor Industries Association just moved here from Utah because the Utah legislation was trying to close up the national parks. He said, we're going to go to a state that gets that outdoor industries is an important part of the economy. We're a natural foods state. We're an education state. We have many great educational institutions. We're a clean energy state. There are, in Colorado, there are more jobs in clean energy than in all of the extractive industries. Those jobs are going down. The clean energy jobs are coming up. They're better paying jobs. They're safer jobs. They're in our communities. They're not boom bust jobs. So we're looking in a very granular way at what is the real economy of Colorado. Which parts of it do we love? Which parts of it are regenerative? And then which parts are degenerative that we want to start to prune away? And so, as I said yesterday, literally, I sat with a team of citizens, people from local agencies, from businesses, from faith communities, as we built this regenerative hub to begin doing this work in what we call the Upper South Platte watershed biosphere. We think in terms of political boundaries, the city of Boulder, the county of Denver. That's not the way the world works. The world works on a watershed. Where does your water come from? Where does your energy come from? And are there ways of getting your water, your energy, your food regeneratively? And then what would an economy look like if you did that? You can do this at home. You can go on the website of the Regenerative Communities Network, which is, to be precise, regencommunities.net. Ask to be accepted and join the conversation about what does a regenerative community look like where you are. There's a regenerative hub in the Hudson Valley, and even this might be something Bard might want to join and get involved with. They're looking at regenerative agriculture. There's a regenerative hub in Tottenville on Staten Island, in Buffalo. There are hubs in Costa Rica, in Australia, in Europe. So join this community, join we all, well-being economy, and join the conversation. We need you.
Well, Hunter, it's been a great hour. I think what I've actually got a commitment. I've been through the course of this conversation, I'm realizing that, you know, we do need the vision here at BARD in terms of meeting our climate action plan, our commitment of climate neutrality. And it made me realize that, you know, people have sort of stepped back from the visioning phase. It's gotten to be very much, you know, one person or a sustainability director who's desperately trying to, you know, get some grants and do some stuff on the margin. But if we're really going to be ambitious, think about this, right? We have to bring everybody together to have a conversation and figure out what their visions are and how they can get engaged and involved.
As always, let me know how I can help.
Yes.
All right.
thanks so much to you both for your leadership and your inspiration. And I just want to remind everybody that Second Nature and the Climate Leadership Network will be hosting our summit, our Higher Education Climate Leadership Summit, February 10, 11, 12 in Tempe, Arizona. And the theme of that is very reflective of what we just talked about. It's local action and global impact. So these things that we do within our communities do end up having a bigger global impact. And again, thanks to both of our presenters today and for all of you for your climate leadership. Have a good day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Adios all.
Bye-bye.